everyone, and welcome to the Cool Down Room. You may have noticed, if you're watching this on YouTube, that I am not in my normal place. I am in my bedroom, which most of you have never seen before, or I don't think anybody has ever seen before. This is actually a new room. I switched rooms with my sister, and I am loving the pink walls. I wanted to record this in my bed, but that is not gonna happen. I am recording this on, photo booth on my iMac right now, on my freaking laptop. So, we're working with what we have. That's the vibe of this video. And if you're on YouTube, you may also have noticed that I am wearing a Mercedes sweater. That is because today we are finally talking about Brocedes. Which is one of the most legendary friendships in F1. It started almost 30 years ago, and it became the focus of a lot of drama 10 years ago, in 2016. So grab some popcorn, get cozy, and let's rewind. Before I start, I do want to remind everybody that, there's real people involved here, okay? It's an insane story, and that's why I'm talking about it. That's why we're talking about it. But, at the end of the day, let's all just be nice. I am not gonna take sides, and neither should y'all. This is only our business because it played out in front of basically every camera in F1 10 years ago, and has continued to play out in front of cameras for the world to see for the last 10 years. They're private, but they're not that private. 26 years ago, give or take. 26 years ago was when Lewis and Nico officially started karting together, right? And these are events that have been mythologized to some degree. So yes, it was incredibly dramatic even then, but time has only made it more dramatic. And I just want all of us to keep that in mind. Also, I want to thank Tumblr user Formula What, because they gave me a very, very good starting timeline to go off of, and it just meant that I was not sitting there typing Brocedes into my search bar, and that made things so much easier for me. The Tumblr girlies love Brocedes, okay? And if you see me looking down, it's because I have all of my notes on my phone. But with that being said, let's officially get into it. So, I want to talk about their backgrounds really quick. Lewis was born on January 7th, 1985. He was born in Stevenage, and I hope I'm saying that right. British people say things really fucking weird. He was very much middle class. His dad worked 3 jobs in order to, fund his racing career. And I mention this specifically because that was not Nico's life. It's never been Nico's life. Nico was born on June 27th, 1985. He was born in Germany. He is German and Finnish, but he was brought up in Monaco. And he is the son of F1 world champion Keke Rosberg. Racing is in his blood, and whether or not he could race if he wanted to do so... As a fucking plane goes by. Whether or not he could race if he wanted to was never a question. There was never, a monetary debate, because racing is incredibly expensive. It takes a lot of money, and that was something that Nico had. But let's move forward to sort of 2000. 2000 is, some people say that Lewis and Nico met in 2000. This is not true. And this is going along with it's been 26 years and things get mythologized over time. Some people say that Lewis and Nico met in 2000. That's not true. They started karting together in 2000. But we have videos of Lewis Hamilton himself saying that, when he was 13, he was invited to Monaco by Nico when they were karting together. So that would have been 1998, right? I believe they met in 1997 while they were karting in Italy. They met when they were 12 or 13. And in 2000, so about 3 years later, they were both 15, and they became karting teammates at Mercedes-Benz McLaren, or MBM. And this team was made for them, okay? They became very fast friends when they met originally, and Keke Rosberg and Ron Dennis, this team was made for them, okay? Mercedes-Benz McLaren, or MBM, was a team that was made for them because Lewis and Nico became very fast friends when they met, and Keke Rosberg, and this team was made basically for them, right? It was made so that they could drive together, because they were such good friends and because they were both incredibly competitive and very, very good racers. Like, Kiki Rosberg, Nico's dad, watched Lewis beat Nico and was like, that was really good. Like, that was really impressive. And they were like, they got on like a house on fire. So this team was made, like, Kiki Rosberg gave them a lot of money. Was kind of his part of it, and then it was the team principal was Don Chiesa. Literally, basically from the time they met, Lewis and Nico were best friends. Okay, Lewis would persuade Nico to buy him sweets. One of the things that I think made them get along so well was that they were both incredibly competitive, right? Ron Kubica, who is a Polish racing driver, is quoted as saying there was always competition, but they didn't fight. It was friendly competition. Like, they would compete over who could eat their pizza the fastest, okay? Nico could ride a unicycle, so Lewis taught himself how to ride one in 2 hours. He was like, Nico can't be the only one who can ride a unicycle. I have to be able to ride one too. They also usually shared hotel rooms at races, and while in those hotel rooms, they would wrestle, which could mean nothing. But in one hotel, they allegedly like broke a bed, and they very rarely actually slept when they were in these hotel rooms. And so their karting boss, again, Dino Chiesa, would get calls from like hotel reception about them. It was like noise complaints, or like they broke something in the room. There was one story where allegedly Nico and Lewis were like throwing mattresses at each other, and somehow one got thrown out the window, and like Lewis ended up with like a cut on his foot and all of this stuff. They were nuts, but also like they were teenage boys, okay? Lewis ended up being invited to go on the Rosberg's family trip to Greece, and later Nico talked about the trip, and he said, I still remember that night in Greece. After dinner, looking at the sea, he said to me, can you imagine how wonderful it would be if we both found ourselves, you and I, at McLaren, fighting for the title? I thought about it, of course. It was my dream. I thought it would be the best thing in the world. Then it actually happened, and I can say that maybe it was, even if the friendship suffered. It's always strange when a dream comes true. It's never how you imagined it. Nico's family would pay for some of Lewis's racing expenses. This is another quote from Nico. This is a quote from Lewis. I've never laughed so much than when we were racing together. Nico was kicking everyone's butt at that time. We had so many great races together and built a great relationship. We were just arriving and enjoying go-karts and eating pizzas every weekend, fighting all the time and just having fun, whereas now it's all business, which is something that Lewis said in 2013 about their friendship. And that all just goes to show how close they were, right? But I'm going to speed through the next few years. So in 2001, Lewis joined Formula Renault, and in 2002, Nico joined Formula BMW, and he won the Drivers' Championship there. They kind of went their separate ways for a little bit. In 2003, Nico joined F3 at Team Rosberg, which was a team founded by his father. He made the podium 8 times in his first season. In 2004, Lewis joined F3 in the Euro Series. Some say with Manor, some say with McLaren. I don't know how that detail gets lost, but sure. This was like 20 years ago, or like, you know. And then in 2005, Nico joined GP2, which, for context, GP2 was an open-wheel motor racing series. It was created to replace Formula 3000 and was the primary feeder championship for Formula 1. In 2023, it basically became F2, right? And that same year, 2005, Lewis won the F3 championship while driving with SAM, or Art Sports et Mécanique, which was a team actually managed by Fred Vasseur. In 2006, Nico entered F1 with Williams, and Lewis moved to GP2, where he won the championship. He actually beat Nelson Piquet Jr., who was later involved in Crashgate, which deserves its own episode. Oh boy! In 2007, the next year, Lewis entered F1 with McLaren. Lewis almost won the championship that year. Unfortunately, he had some rough races, both because of him and the car, and he finished 1 point behind Kimi Räikkönen. That was Fernando Alonso's last year with McLaren, and Lewis ended up signing a 5-year deal with McLaren as their first driver. So, 2007 was also the year of Spygate, which also deserves its own episode. But let's just note, okay, Lewis Hamilton has never been squeaky clean. All right, Old Testament Lewis, like pre-2020 Lewis, was objectively fucking insane. And even New Testament Lewis is kind of nutso. So, like, Lewis, I think some people put Lewis on this, especially since, like, 2020, and that might be changing right now given he's dating Kim Kardashian, but this pedestal of, like, he's a good person and he's an environmentalist. Not to say that Lewis Hamilton is a bad person, but, like, he's an environmentalist and he stands up for, like, social justice and, like, those kinds of causes and da-da, right? But we should also just note that, like, he's done some stuff. He's not squeaky clean as we all like to perceive him as. All right, he's not even close to squeaky clean, frankly. But anyway, cut ahead to 2008. And Nico gets his first podium in Australia. Lewis won that race. There is footage of them jumping around in the cool down room, laughing and celebrating. They wanted to be teammates. Like, they would talk about it all the time. They made plans hoping to be teammates and champions together. That was the goal, right? And so this was a huge moment for them, right? Like, to be on the podium together was a dream come true. And that year, Lewis also won his first World Drivers' Championship, right? So this was like a huge moment for both of them. And however, Lewis would not win another WDC for 5 years. He would never win again with McLaren. Well, 2 years later in 2010, Nico joins Mercedes with Michael Schumacher. And this was the first year that Mercedes as a team even existed. We're going to start kind of skipping a few years now. Or I guess not. Because I have notes for 2011 and 2012. But for 2011, it was Mercedes' like first 3 years as a team. All right. They had a lot of technical issues from 2011, really 2010 to 2013. Despite all of that, in 2012, Nico won his first race. He did finish 9th that season, but it was still a huge, huge moment for him and a huge accomplishment. And he actually bested Michael Schumacher every single season. In terms of points, he simply was just better at navigating the steering issues in the car. That Mercedes sucked, okay? The 2010 to like 2013-ish Mercedes sucked. It was bad. There were a lot of technical issues. They were still finding their footing as a team. In 2013, Lewis joins Nico at Mercedes. In 2014, the Mercedes was incredible. It was a beautiful car. They were finishing races 17 to 30. There's times where I believe they finished 30 seconds ahead of their competitors. They had no competition. Lewis and Nico had no competition except for each other now that they were on the same team and had this amazing car, right? Which wasn't great for them and their friendship. So moving ahead a bit to Bahrain, to what would have been, I believe, the first race of the season in 2014, the two fought for the win and ended up, I say colliding, but it was like kind of like a little brush, is my understanding of it. They collided, they bumped, and there was this like kind of mock fight in Park Ferme after the race, only for Lewis to then find out that Nico had won because he used an engine mode that Mercedes had banned. So essentially he had cheated. I say cheated. He cheated based on Mercedes rules. This was like totally legal in FIA standards. But he had used that, banned engine mode to get a power advantage in the closing laps. And this pissed Lewis off. All right. Like, bad. And then in Spain, Lewis won a few months later. Lewis wins by 0.6 seconds. And Nico said that he could have passed him with one more lap, because they were fighting until like the last second, all right? Like, this is where the drama kind of starts, right? And so Lewis defended with the same engine mode that Nico had used in Bahrain that Lewis was so mad about before. All right, there's some hypocrisy going on. So moving forward to Monaco, we're there's a lot here, all right? So if it seems like I'm like not really doing transitions, it's because there is a lot to get through. Monaco is what I would consider the big one. I know not everybody considers this to be like the big one, but I would, because this is when they officially stop being friends, okay? Lewis straight up told the press that he and Nico weren't friends anymore. And it's funny because this is also the same year that Sky Sports Quali promo. No, this is for Monaco. That same year at Monaco, Sky Sports Quali promo was essentially a Brocedes edit set to Take Me to Church by Hosier. It was not just Lewis and Nico starting drama, okay? Everybody else was like feeding into it a lot. So picture this. It's Q3. Nico is ahead of Lewis. Nico is on provisional pole, but Lewis is pretty close. All right, he actually might take pole if he's given the chance. So Nico says on his radio, he goes, "You know what, guys? I made a mistake." And he rolls his car to a stop in the slip road. He's saying, there's an issue, right? There's an issue with the car. I did something, and there's an issue with the car. He rolls his car to a stop in the slip road. And the yellow flags come out, and Lewis has to abort his lap. Nico and his side of the garage say that it was an accident. Nico thought that there was something wrong with the car, and then there wasn't. The stewards say it's fine. It's, we don't have to, keep talking about this. It's not a big deal. It's totally legal. Lewis says that this was on purpose, and that Mercedes' data proves that Lewis had done all this on purpose. I, along with Formula One, as some who was mentioned earlier, am surprised that Lewis did not just tweet out Mercedes telemetry, because he did in fact tweet McLaren's after the 2012 Bahrain Grand Prix. But I guess he got it, which, by the way, not supposed to do. That is highly confidential information. But he didn't tweet it out, so that's surprising. But Nico gets pole, and he wins Monaco, and that puts him in the lead for the championship. So, moving along to Hungary, Lewis has an engine failure in Hungary, and he ends up starting from the pit lane during the actual race. He manages to make his way up to the front of the pack, and then there's a safety car, which puts him ahead of Nico. But Nico still has to pit, so he's like, okay, he basically asked Lewis to let him get past. He was like, can I just move past? Because once I pit, he will get the place back anyway, right? It doesn't matter. But Lewis refused. Lewis refused, even though he would have gotten the place back eventually anyway, right? Mercedes implied that Lewis's blocking fucked Nico's race. That Lewis, telling him, no, you can't get past me, screwed Nico's race, which is probably true. But Niki Lauda was on Lewis's side, as he was for a lot of this. And so Lewis didn't get punished. It didn't matter, right? This is the last race before the summer break. Nico was basically left to stew for 4 weeks and to be mad for 4 weeks, which makes way for Belgium, where in the second lap, Nico has contact with Lewis, giving Lewis a puncture and knocking him out of the race. This is what most people refer to as, the big one, okay? Nico's end plate hit Lewis's tire, which then basically exploded. Nico rejoined in 19th, and at that point he had lost so much downforce, and his race at that point was so bad that he asked to retire, and he did. This was the first time that they really had contact where it really messed up one of their races, so this is kind of why people consider it the big one. According to Lewis, Nico admitted to having crashed with him intentionally to, and I quote, prove a point. Nico finished second, but he was booed on the podium. Nico later apologized, but he said that his view of the events were very different and he preferred to keep it internal. I say he apologized. He would do video vlogs, and in his video vlog after Belgium, he basically said the whole my view of the events are different. I know what Lewis said, but I would just rather keep it internal, right? He did apologize later, for real. Lewis in Belgium basically apologized to his side of the garage and said that, he was sorry it happened because his side of the garage works so hard every weekend, right? Please, and this is a good time to mention, it was not just Lewis and Nico fighting. It was their sides of the garage fighting too. Mercedes was there's a reason they call it the Silver War. Mercedes was basically having a civil war, okay? So moving ahead to Abu Dhabi, Lewis won and he took the world champion title that year, right? Nico had a problem and he was told to retire the car, but he just kept going. He finished in 14th. Nico went to the cool down room to congratulate Lewis. So, all right, maybe they're fine, right? Even though Lewis said they're not friends anymore and they've been having problems, maybe they're not horrible. They can speak to each other. Well, in 2015, we're moving ahead to 2015. In China, Nico was second in what was a 1-2 finish, but he claimed that Lewis was backing him up and basically forcing him to go slower so that maybe Sebastian Vettel would pass him, was I guess the idea, right? And by the way, okay, poor Sebastian Vettel witnessed all of this and had to do media with these two. He was their evil couples therapist, all right? Well, Lewis said, in response to all of what Nico said, Lewis said, "It's not my job to look after Nico's race. It's my job to manage the car and bring the car home as healthy and fast as possible. That's what I did." So they're not doing great. Cutting ahead to the United States, the stakes are high, all right? So at that point, if Lewis won in the United States, he would have won the championship, and he would have done so with 3 races left, which is exactly what he did. Lewis forced Nico wide at turn 1 and claimed the lead. And then the Mercedes and the Red Bulls were fighting for basically the entire race. And Nico led in the closing stages, but he ran deep into a corner, letting Lewis past him entirely on accident. It was just one little mistake, right? Nico finished P2. He was fuming, and he said that Lewis's aggressive move at the beginning of the race was one step too far. This is where we get the infamous throw of the cap in the cooldown room. Lewis threw the P2 cap at Nico, and then Nico threw it back at him. Lewis and Nico have stopped speaking by 2018, right? By 2018. By 2016, Lewis and Nico have stopped talking. And Nico, let me tell you, all right, Nico had a wife and Nico has a wife and children. He gave up his entire life in order to win in 2016. He stopped sleeping in the same bed as his wife. He stopped taking care of his children. He stopped cycling towards the end so that he would lose 1 kilogram of muscle mass, which would make him slightly faster. He basically spent every waking moment trying to get into Lewis's head. And I think he was pretty successful given that he won, but also Nico knew him so well. This is Nico knew him probably better than anybody. He said it himself. He said, "We were good together. Many say he is a strange guy. I think he is unique. I know him perfectly. I know how his brain works. I know everything about him." That was Nico about Lewis, okay? Nico admitted that, he knew everything about Lewis, and that is why he was able to get into his head so well, right? And you know what? Nico's right, okay? Lewis is a weird guy. To be honest, that is as much as I could cover without this video being 2 hours long. Like I said, one day we will have a 2-hour-long Brocedes Bible that I will do for this channel, this podcast, but this is where we're at. Next week, we will be back for Canada. We are finally back racing, and hopefully I will actually be able to watch it live this time. I should mostly be able to. But other than that, make sure that you follow us on Instagram at Ithaca Cooldown Room and subscribe to the Spotify and the YouTube. Like the YouTube video. But other than that, that is all that I have for you this week. Chloe and I will see you next week when we cover Canada. But until then, have a beautiful week. Mwah. F1 rules going on at the time. All right. So things were just weird. But it was bad. It was not great for them at that time. So in 2016 Spain of 2016 is what I think is the most iconic crash in this entire saga, okay? Nico made a switch error on the formation lap of the race, and his car went into the wrong engine mode. So he was running a lot slower than Lewis. And so the race starts, and Nico managed to close the door on Lewis, right? Keep him back. Lewis lost control on the grass and spun into Nico and took them both out of the race on the first lap. Something that no one was happy with. Toto was very upset about it, like it was awful. Austria of 2016, Lewis had brake problems the entire race, but he was still very likely to win. And then in the last lap, Lewis caught up to Nico and he goes into overtake. Nico refuses to back down. They start fighting and they collide. Lewis took the win. Nico, in a damaged car, went from first to fourth in the last lap. Toto Wolff threatened team orders, and the stewards blamed Nico, issuing him 2 penalty points for failing to allow racing room and causing a collision. Things were bad, okay? However bad you think things were, it was probably worse. I'll owe to be a fly on the wall, right? I cannot imagine what was going on behind closed doors at Mercedes at the time. So cut ahead to Monza, and Nico gets booed, right? He got booed at Monza. He was I want to say he was second place on the podium. But as they're doing the questions, as they're doing the little interviews, he switched to Italian to basically get the crowd back on his side. And he like hijacked the interview and was like, you know what? We're going to speak Italian now. And he used that to like get the crowd back on his side. Nico is a super smart guy. He is a racing encyclopedia. He almost studied engineering. He's a polyglot. He speaks a ton of languages. He's a crazy smart guy, and he is one of my favorite drivers ever. But Nico's kind of an insane man. But this is also a good time to mention that, like, sometimes Nico would speak Italian specifically so that Lewis couldn't understand him. It was bad, okay? It was really, really bad. So cut ahead to Mexico, right? Max gets a time penalty, and he was escorted out of the... This is one of those, like, rare moments of, like, friendliness between Nico and Lewis. Max got a time penalty. He was in third, and he was escorted out of the cool-down room, which, by the way, happened again at COTA in 2017. Sebastian Vettel took his place in the cool-down room, and Lewis and Nico... who were first and second respectively, were actually, like, talked to each other about it at this point. And Crofty said, and I quote, "You know what Max Verstappen has succeeded in doing? Getting Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton to talk to each other." Crofty, I love you. I love you dearly. So, Abu Dhabi. All right, last race of the year, it all comes down to this. Lewis gets team orders from his race engineer and the technical director of Mercedes. He ignores them. He slowed down and backed Nico into the pack, hoping that everybody else would then overtake Nico and that there would be enough of a points difference that Lewis would win the that Lewis would win the world champion title, right? Nico finished in second, and he won the world championship title by 5 points. That's by 5 points, all right? And then... during the FIA prize-giving ceremony, he announced his surprise retirement. He said that was going to be his last year in F1. He was done with it, and honestly, who could blame him? Like I said, he gave up his entire life. He, at one point, for the last 2 weeks of the season, could only keep down, like, Kellogg's Frosties. He gave up a lot. He was talking to his therapist daily. Like, it got really bad. Okay, it was an incredibly stressful time. For both of them, but especially for Nico. You know, about it, Lewis said, this is the first time he's won in 18 years, hence why it was not a surprise he decided to stop. Wild. But he's also got a family to focus on and probably wants to have more children. Formula One takes up so much of your time. In terms of missing the rivalry, of course, because we started karting when we were 13, and we would always talk about being champions. When I joined this team, Nico was there, which was something we spoke about when we were kids. So it's going to be very, very strange, and for sure it will be sad to not have him in the team next year. So after that, they kind of stopped speaking to each other entirely. They refused to acknowledge each other's existence. Lewis avoided Nico like the plague, which I get it personally. I refuse to go near a certain college campus 2 hours from mine. And please remember that, like, Lewis and Nico were living in the same apartment building. Like, they were, like, across from each other. I think they were across. In my mind, they were, like, across from each other. I don't think I've ever gotten information confirming that, but I've always pictured them that way. Especially because Lewis was once asked about this, and he basically said that, like, whenever he saw Nico in the corridor, like, they were on the same floor, he would just, like, dart back inside his own apartment, and he would just, like, basically go hide until Nico was gone. Which, you know what, valid. But now it's been said that Lewis sends Nico's kids Christmas presents every year, you know. And in 2021, Crofty, who is just an incredible man, said the infamous quote, "This man, Nico, knows Lewis Hamilton. Friend, teammate, childhood buddy, rival, everything but a lover, really. Or everything but a lover, quite frankly." I'm going to say that again. So, you know, in 2021, Crofty, who is an incredible man, said the infamous quote, "This man, Nico, knows Lewis Hamilton. Friend, teammate, childhood buddy, rival, everything but a lover, quite frankly." Also during that year, right before Abu Dhabi, when Lewis was fighting with Max for the title, by the way, the infamous quote about everything but a lover was said in front of Nico Rosberg, okay? But that same year, right before Abu Dhabi, Lewis was asked if he thought that he was a better driver in 2021 than he was in 2016. And he said yes, and teammate. Nico was watching that. We got to see his, like, shocked expression live on air. Jensen Button, who was with Nico when he saw that clip, turns to look at Nico, not an ounce of hesitation. Okay, everybody knows what Lewis is talking about. And also, like, we've all seen Lewis get, like, war flashbacks when told you know him well. Kendrick Lamar used footage of Nico Rosberg during, like, winning a race during one of his shows. They have just, all of their drama has just, like, imploded and just fizzled into the rest of the universe, okay? But that's that. Like, honestly, now, they acknowledge each other's existence. They, you know, they don't entirely ignore each other anymore. But as far as we all know, they don't talk. They aren't really friends. I mean, Nico has said that, like, he considers himself and Lewis friends, but, like, they're, like, they seem to be, like, at the awkward, like, small talk in the supermarket stage, you know? Like, they're not good friends, but they can, like, tolerate each other's presence, you know? But, you know, that's that. One day, I might do this again as a full video with analysis and with every single bullet point of their lives and their relationship and the full story, but that would take me like a year to research, so it's gonna be a while before that happens. One day I'll make, like, the Brocedes Bible, and it'll be everything I can find, but for now, this is what we're at.